What is up, everybody? My name is Logan Sharon, and welcome to a CTF Sharon Talks Football. Today, we're going to be doing things a little bit different and a little bit more fun. I'm going to be comparing NFL teams to Halloween candy. Now, if you don't understand what's going on, so basically, I'm going through all the NFL teams, and I'm comparing them to each Halloween candy I think they are comparable to, and explaining why I think they are similar. If you still don't understand it, you'll understand it more when we go through it. So before we get started, don't forget to comment, like, subscribe, turn on the notification bell so you can see all my videos whenever I post. With all that out of the way, let's get started. So before we get started, please know I will be making some jokes about some of these teams. So if you're a fan of any of these teams, please try not to get upset. This is just supposed to be fun. So the first team we've got is the Arizona Cardinals, and I compared them to gummy bears. I compared these two because both the Cardinals and gummy bears are good, but they're not great. You will always see them around, and you're never disappointed with them, but they are both not anything special. So explaining a little more, the Cardinals, they've always been around the middle, sometimes bad, sometimes good, but they've never been near the top. Same with gummy bears. They've always been around, they've always been popular, but they've never been near the top of best candies of all time. Next, we got the Atlanta Falcons, and I compared them with Laffy Taffy. Both of these were beloved in the past and are both slowly making a comeback. The Falcons were one of the most beloved teams in the NFL through the late 2000s, early 2010s to late 2010s, and they were in a gap where none of them were heard, and now they're starting to make a comeback. Look how good they've been doing this year. And same goes with Laffy Taffy. They were really popular back in the day. They just had a little bit of a void where they weren't popular anymore, and now they're starting to make a comeback. Next team we've got is the Baltimore Ravens, and I compared them to Sour Patch Kids. I compared these two together because both are exploding with flavor and talent at the start, but soon the flavor and talent starts to fade or underperform toward the end. The Baltimore Ravens are always one of the best teams in the NFL when it comes to the regular season. They always look like one of the best teams to perform to the playoffs, are always one of the top 5 to make the Super Bowl, but when the playoffs come around, they always underperform. Kind of like Sour Patch Kids. You have them at first, you put them in your mouth, they're really exploding with flavor, and the longer you have them in the mouth, it starts to fade away. Next team we've got is the Buffalo Bills, and I compared them to Starburst, but not the long sticks you can get at the store, only these small packs you can only get at Halloween. I compared these two together because with both of them, you never know what you're expecting, you never know what you're getting out of them. The Buffalo Bills, you never know what you're going to get out of this team. You never know if you're going to get one of the best teams in the league, or you never know if you're going to get a huge disappointment. Just like Starburst, you never know what flavor you're going to get. You know if you're going to get a pink or a red, the two best ones, or in my opinion, if you're going to get one of the lower end flavors, the yellow or the orange ones. If you want, you can leave your favorite Starburst flavor down in the comments below. Next team we got is the Carolina Panthers, and I compared them to Ring Pops. Simply put, the Panthers are always ring searching, but they will never get it, so this was the only kind of ring they could possibly get. I don't know, this was probably the hardest one to think of, so that's the best I got, I'm sorry. Next team we've got is the Chicago Bears, and I compared them to Hershey's Kisses. Simply put, they're both classics, and they have both been here since the very beginning. The Chicago Bears are the very first NFL franchise to be made, so they've been around since the beginning. Same with Hershey's Kisses. They're one of the first candies to be made, and they've been around since the beginning. Next team we've got is the Cincinnati Bengals, and I compared them to Fun Dip. Simply put, just like the Falcons and Laffy Taffy, they're both classics back in the day that everyone beloved, and now they're both starting to make a comeback. The Bengals were one of the better teams in the NFL back in the 80s. They were always beloved by fans. And then they had a void where they were just really bad, and now they're starting to make a comeback in the NFL again. Same with Fun Dip. Always beloved by kids in the day. They were always one of the most bought candies in the world at that time, and now they're slowly starting to make a comeback during Halloween. Next team we got are the Cleveland Browns, and I compared them to Nestle Crunch Bars. They were both really popular back in the old days, but now they are never talked about or hardly seen anymore. The Cleveland Browns were always one of the better teams back in the old days in the NFL, but nowadays they're always been a joke. They've always underperformed, and they've never been talked about as a threat. Nestle Crunch used to be one of the most popular candies of all time back in the day, but nowadays you hardly see them anymore. You hardly see them around, and you hardly see them around Halloween. I've been waiting for this one. Next, we got the Dallas Cowboys, and I compared them to candy corn. Simply put, they're both super popular at their fields, but they've always been super hated. The Dallas Cowboys are the most popularized, most advertised team in the NFL from the 90s to now, and they've always been one of the most hated NFL teams in the league. Same with candy corn. You see them everywhere on advertisements, on TV, at stores, malls, airports, you name it. But they've always been known for being one of the most hated candies in the world. I'm sorry, Cowboys fans. Maybe I'll be nice to them one day. Next, we got the Denver Broncos, and I compared them to Fruity Tootsie Rolls. Simply put, the Broncos and the Fruity Tootsie Rolls have always been carried by one player or one flavor. The Broncos are historically been a pretty decent team, but whenever they have been good, they've always been carried by that one player that has put a spark to that team to make them go as far as they have. Same with Fruity Tootsie Rolls. They've always been carried by that one flavor, and that is the vanilla one. That's the only good one in my opinion, and the rest suck. Next team we've got are the Detroit Lions, and I compared them to Butterfingers. They were both starting off really slow throughout history and were never talked about, and nowadays they are one of the most beloved by almost everybody. The Detroit Lions have always had a franchise where they've never performed, they've never met expectations, they've never been a threat. But nowadays they are one of the best teams in the NFL and one of the most likable teams in the NFL. Same with Butterfingers. I don't understand this one, but Butterfingers were never popular back in the day. I don't understand it. They're one of my favorite candies of all time. But now I'm happy to know that everybody loves them so much nowadays, because I've been saying it the whole time. Butterfingers are one of the best candies in the world. Next team we've got is the Green Bay Packers, and I compared them to Hershey bars. Very relatable to the Chicago Bears and the Hershey Kisses, but these two have always had more to offer. The Green Bay Packers, just like the Bears, are one of the very first NFL teams to ever be made, but they've always had more talent and they've always had more to offer. Just like the Hershey's, they're just about the same flavor-wise, but the Hershey bar has more to offer. They have more chocolate, so that's why they're related to the Packers, in my opinion. Next team we've got is the Houston Texans, and I compared them to Airheads. Both are fairly new and are both beloved by the youth. The Houston Texans are the NFL's newest franchise, being made in 2002, and nowadays they're one of the best teams in the NFL, and all the kids love to watch the Texans. Just like Airheads, one of the newer candies in the world, but all the kids absolutely love Airheads, as well as myself. I think Airheads are one of the better candies out there, so I think that's why they're related to the Texans. Next team we've got is the Indianapolis Colts, and I compared them to Snickers bars. They are both good, but not near the best. The Colts have always been there when it comes to a franchise. They've always had good history when it comes to winning, like Peyton Manning being there and Marvin Harrison Jr. But nowadays, they've been good, but they've not been near the top at all. Same with Snickers bars. They're always one of the most popular candies in the world, but they've never been voted to be like one of the best. They've always been around the middle. They've always been good, but not like near the best. Next team we've got is the Jacksonville Jaguars, and I compared them to Pop Rocks. Both show a little pop through small periods of time, but mostly don't have much to offer. The Jaguars, just like the Texans, just a little bit longer, are one of the newer franchises in the NFL, so cut them a little bit of slack. They've had some instances where they're a good team, but most of the time they've never had much to offer. Same with Pop Rocks. They pop when you have them in your mouth, but they don't pop as much. You get what I'm saying? This one was kind of hard to do, so this is the best I had. Next team we've got is the Kansas City Chiefs, and I compared them to Smarties. Both are beloved by the youth, but the adults absolutely despise them. We all get it. The Kansas City Chiefs are one of the best teams in the NFL. They've won 3 out of the 5 chances to get rings, and they have Mahomes, so yep, they're the best team in the NFL, but that doesn't mean we all love them. The youth do, but us adults don't. Same thing with Smarties. Kids absolutely love this candy. I'm not going to get into what they do with these at school, but let's just say the kids have always loved Smarties. But us adults realize they're just sugary and they're not good at all. They're just straight sugar. They're terrible. Next team we've got is the Las Vegas Raiders, and I compared them to butterscotch candies. Both were only popular when most of our grandfathers were at young ages. The Raiders were a really good team, a very threatening team back when most of our grandfathers were at the young ages that most kids are now. But nowadays, they're one of the most pathetic franchises in the league right now. Same with butterscotch candies. These are around ever since our grandfathers were like at young ages, but they have always been terrible. They've always been one of the worst candies, but they've always been one of the most popular. Next team we've got is the Los Angeles Chargers, and I compared them to Mounds chocolate bars. Both are just there and are always easy to forget about. The Los Angeles Chargers are one of the most forgettable franchises in the NFL. When you're not an NFL fan, you will always forget this team exists. Same with the Mound Bar. You always forget this candy bar exists, and they always get overshadowed by their competitor, which we'll be getting to now. And that team is the Los Angeles Rams, and I compared them to Almond Joy. Just like the Chargers and Mounds bars, but they both completely overshadow them. The Rams and the Chargers play at the same city and they play in the same stadium, but everybody remembers the Rams because they're the most popular franchise out of the two, and they've always won the most. Same with Almond Joy. They've always been around the most, and they've always been remembered the most. Not Mound bars. People forget those things exist. Next team we've got is the Miami Dolphins, and I compared them to Warheads. The Dolphins, whenever you cheer for them, you will instantly regret it. And with Warheads, when you have a Warhead, you will instantly regret it. Nowadays, the Miami Dolphins have always been one of the better teams in the NFL, not this year so far just because of injuries. But fans would always predict this team to go far, and they've always seemed to disappoint. And with Warheads, they're extremely sour candies. It already says it on the packaging. But whenever you have them, it tends to give you a little bit of a headache. It tends to burn your mouth. And whenever you have a Warhead, you instantly seem to regret it. And it kind of relates pretty well because if you think about it, Tua always has a Warhead every single season, if you know what I mean. Next team we've got is the Minnesota Vikings, and I compared them to Twizzlers. They're relatable because the Vikings can rarely finish a game, and it's hard to finish a Twizzler. At least that's how it is for me. I've never liked Twizzlers, and I've always had a problem like finishing them because after the first two bites, I always get tired of them. So that's why I compared them to the Vikings. So if you have a different thought of what candy the Vikings can relate to, you let me know in the comments. But explain the Vikings have been pretty good the last couple years, but their main problem is they always have a problem finishing games. They always have had a huge lead in almost every game they've had. They've played well, but towards the end is the most important part of the game to finish it off, and that's one thing they've always struggled with. Next team we've got is the New England Patriots, and I compared them to lollipops. Any lollipop you can think of except blow pops. We'll get to that one in a minute. I compared these two together because they were both insanely popular for decades but are no longer popular or talked about anymore. The Patriots had a historic dynasty for 2 decades, but now that dynasty has ran out, and now they're one of the worst teams in the NFL, probably the worst team in the NFL right now. This one is kind of sad, but lollipops, they've always been one of the most advertised and popularized candies in the world, but nowadays you never hear about them and you never get them anymore. It's kind of sad. Next team we've got is the New Orleans Saints, and I compared them to Werther's Original. They're relatable because they are both good at first, and the longer time passes, they get worse and worse until they're unbearable to eat or watch. So all you fans trying to comment that I'm making fun of your teams and it's not okay, I'm whipping on my team right now, alright? The Saints have always had this start to the season where they've looked promising, but every single time they always choke, they always find ways to lose, and they always find ways to disappoint. Same thing with Werther's Originals. If you've never heard of these candies, they're really sour caramel candies. So when you have them in your mouth, they taste pretty decent. They taste a little sweet at first. But the longer you have them in your mouth, the more sour and sour they get, and the worse they become, and you instantly regret having these candies. Next team we've got is the New York Giants, and I compared them to Runts because they were both really popular back in the day, but now they are terrible. The Giants through the late 2000s, early 2010s had a couple Super Bowls, beating the Patriots twice. Back in the day, they had a really solid team. Had one of the best, if not the best, defensive player of all time in Lawrence Taylor. But nowadays, they've always been terrible for the last few years other than that 2022 year. And for Runts, I guess it's a little different because Runts have always been terrible in my opinion. But back in the day, these things were super popular. They were always around, but nowadays, you never see them or hear about them anymore unless you go to stores and you get them out of those like little quarter machines. Next team we've got is the New York Jets, and I compared them to cotton candy. I know this isn't really a Halloween candy, but hear me out. Both of these have always tried to make a comeback, but always failed to meet expectations. The New York Jets or a historic franchise. They do have a Super Bowl ring, but nowadays we're seeing it now. They've brought in so much talent like Aaron Rodgers and Devontae Adams, but even still, they've always failed to meet expectations. Right now, they're 2-5, and they are not having the season they've wanted. Same with cotton candy. Just like the Jets, they were super popular back in the day, but nowadays you hardly see them unless you go to like baseball games, I guess. But nowadays you never see them, and people hardly have them anymore. Next team we got is the Philadelphia Eagles, and I compared them to Reese's Pieces. Simply put, they're both decent, but they're really overrated. The Philadelphia Eagles have, the last couple years, have been good. They've been decent. They've always had a lot of good players, but compared to others, they have been super overrated, super overhyped, especially by the fans. And Reese's Pieces have always been one of the most overrated candies out there. I never thought these were that good, and I don't know why they're publicized all that much. I think Reese's Cups are way better, but yeah, this is why I think these two are relatable by a lot. Next team we got is the Pittsburgh Steelers, and I compared them to M&M's. I think these two are relatable because they're both one of the classics. They've always been one of the most popular, and they have always been good. And bonus hint, depending on what flavor or team you get, they could be one of the best. The Steelers have always been a historic franchise, one of the best franchises of all time, having 6 Super Bowls, and nowadays they are still pretty good. And like the M&Ms, they have always been one of the most popular and one of the better candies out there. And they have so many good flavors like the peanut and peanut butter here. My personal favorite is the peanut butter. But depending on what flavor you get can really change your experience. Next team we've got is the San Francisco 49ers, and I compared them to Kit Kat bars. Both are really good and have always been really popular and ranked one of the best, but also struggle to be the best. The 49ers are one of the best NFL franchises of all time. They've always had so many historically great players like Joe Montana and Jerry Rice, and are still really good, having players like Fred Warner and George Kittle. But they've always been struggling to be the best team. They've always made it super far, but have always struggled to rank amongst everybody else. Same with Kit Kats, one of the best candies of all time, no debate. One of the best tasting candies of all time, no debate. But whenever you see tier lists of candies from other people, always seen ranking of other candies from people, you've always seen this candy being one of the best, but not the best. Next team we've got is the Seattle Seahawks, and I compared them to Bottle Pops. Both of these were really popular in the 2010s, but have struggled to make a comeback since. The Seattle Seahawks, if it wasn't for the Patriots, were the team of the 2010s. They were historically amazing. The Legion of Boom, Russell Wilson in his prime, Marshawn Lynch being one of the best running backs of all time in my opinion. But ever since, the Seahawks have always struggled to meet those expectations. Same with Bottle Pops. In the 2010s, these candies came out, and they were one of the most popular candies ever. And nowadays, you never see them anymore, and they've been basically an afterthought. Next team we got is the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and I compared them to Blow Pops. I told you we get to this candy. I compared them to Blow Pops because they both needed one small change to contend and to stick out. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers, ever since their first Super Bowl win in 2002, after that Super Bowl win, they have always struggled to find talent, they've always struggled to contend, and they've always struggled to stick out. Same thing with Blow Pops. If you look at them, they look like any other lollipop, but the thing that makes them stick out is they have chocolate inside. I know that sounds gross, but at least they have something different compared to other lollipops, so I think these two are pretty relatable. Next team we got is the Tennessee Titans, and I compared them to licorice, or black licorice, whatever you want to call it. I compared these two together because they both get stale really quickly. The Tennessee Titans were one of the most hyped up teams in the offseason. I believed in the hype myself, but when the season came around, the offense can't click. The defense keeps getting gassed, and look how bad they're doing now. They've been ranked one of the worst teams in the NFL this year, and hopefully it'll turn around, but most likely it won't. And same with black licorice or licorice. It has been historically known to be super stale once you get them. You have to have them in a plastic bag or something. If you leave them out, they're going to get stale super quick. And finally, the last team we've got is the Washington Commanders, and I compared them to Whoppers. Simply put, they were both never popular back in the day, but they are both very quickly starting to make a comeback. The Washington Commanders were never a popular team back in the day. They were never contending, and they've never had really good talent. But this year, something's changed. They've had a really good season so far. They have a really good team. Jaden Daniels is one of the best QBs in the league so far this year. And they look to contend this year, and I think they will. Same thing with Whoppers. They're really good candies in my opinion. They're really underrated, but they were never popular back in the day. But nowadays, people really now understand how good these candies are, and they've gotten really popular nowadays. And also, a side note, another reason why these can be related is because both of them have terrible names and they need to change them immediately. And there you guys have it. That was me comparing every NFL team to Halloween candy. I hope you guys enjoyed this one. This one took a lot of time and thought to make, but it was super fun to make as well. I had a really good time making it, so I hope you enjoyed it. Before I go, don't forget to comment, like, subscribe, turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any of my videos whenever I post. I'm Logan Sharon. I'll see you next time.